If you're reluctant to try new dishes or have an overwhelming fear of trying new foods that you haven't tried before, you may have something called food neurophobia. Today I'm just going to discuss what this is and how you can beat it. So my own experience with food is something of great enjoyment when I was growing up. I always enjoyed trying new foods. I always saw it as a positive thing. Now, there were a couple of foods, I remember tomatoes and mushrooms, that I always found that had a really distinct flavour and that I just didn't enjoy. And I remember sometimes my parents trying to get me to eat them, but for some reason it just never really stuck with me and I always tried to avoid them. It was only until I went to university and I remember there was a sort of deli or a cafe that was just next to Finchley Road Tube Station, and we used to go there a lot on our lunch breaks. They used to have things like paninis and things. It was quite a cheap place to eat. But I remember that they always seemed to want to put tomatoes in the paninis, and I didn't ever want to be one of those people that asked them if they could take it out. And I would end up just eating them, even though I really didn't like the taste. Over a course of, maybe a year or so, on and off, obviously we weren't always eating there. I remember once that they had a sandwich that didn't have any tomatoes in, and I remember eating it and thinking, God, the sandwich is really dry and doesn't really have much flavour. And then it sort of dawned on me, actually, I did like the ones that were in tomatoes. And then I realised actually that I could tolerate them a lot more. And I remember speaking to my housemate at the time a little bit about this, and he said he remembers reading an article that sort of said if you keep eating the same food, especially foods that you don't dislike, your brain or your taste buds gets used to it and then you end up enjoying it. So I found that really fascinating at the time, and then ever since then I've always applied that logic to anything that I don't really like when it comes to food. I just always don't like the idea of not liking a certain type of food. I've done this recently just with olives, so I keep eating olives. Every time the opportunity presents, I have a few olives, and I've realised over time I'm definitely getting to like them a lot more. So I came across a study that was published this year of 2019, so in June, and what they found that food neurophobia had correlation. So this wasn't proven, but has correlation between certain diseases. These are sort of diseases that you can't catch from others. So it's not things like flu or colds, but it was things like diabetes, autoimmune conditions, heart conditions, stroke, those sort of things. And it was amazing to me that that they found this, but actually I guess logically this makes sense, because if obviously you're eating a lot of different types of food, then you're getting a lot of other vitamins, minerals, nutrients that you might not be getting. So can we do something about this? Now, food neurophobia is thought to be 2/3 genetic, but this doesn't mean that you can't overcome it. I found an article that also stated that there's probably some psychosocial factors that are playing a part. Parents that were generally more adverse to want to try new foods seem to pass that on to their children, and their children obviously seem to pick up these behaviours. I think this makes sense from an evolutionary point of view. It makes sense to think that if a long time ago, especially when we were fighting for survival, it would make sense that we would follow our parents or watch our parents and see what they ate, and then we would eat the same things. Also, we would avoid the same foods because these foods potentially could have been harmful to us. A study found that intervening early was the best way to try to alter this behaviour, and here are a few of the pointers. Making eating an enjoyable experience shared by the family that everyone does together. Try to cook one meal that everyone eats instead of making multiple different meals. If you have a particular food dislike, try not to show it. Showing children that you dislike a certain food might change the children's view on that food. Make sure it's an enjoyable experience for children. Pressuring children to eat disliked food or threatening punishment for not eating tends to exacerbate the problem. For us adults, exposing yourself to a new food increases your chance of liking that food. A new food should be eaten as many times as 15 times to increase your preference to it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. The takeaway message is to try new foods, especially if you haven't eaten them before, and try to think of it as a good thing. Sometimes I think we need to do things that we don't like and put ourselves in uncomfortable positions, especially if we know that it's good for us. I think a lot of the time it comes down to the story we tell ourselves, and if you tell yourself this is a good thing and that you're going to enjoy this new food, I think you're more likely to enjoy it. If you want to discover more about your health and well-being, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching.